Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure. Welcome to beautiful Vancouver. If you're a visitor, we've got the weather for you. If you're a regular visitor to Canada, you might find it's a little bit different these days. You walk down the street and you see mothers grabbing their children by the lapels, and you see best friends arguing in the street. Don't worry, it's a federal election. And things will all be back to normal on October 19th. All those divorces that have been threatened, there'll be some unhappy lawyers in town once it's all done. So thank you very much for coming and being a part of this conference, our third annual conference on LNG. And I want to talk to you a little bit today about why LNG in British Columbia. What makes this place different from other places around the world in which there are other investment opportunities. But first, I just want to take a second to look backward at some of the things that we've accomplished, and recognizing that these accomplishments have not been things that just government and industry and people vitally interested in this industry have gotten together. These are accomplishments that all British Columbians can take some pride and responsibility for, because the work that we've done has really been a collective achievement over the last 4 years. We have a very diverse economy in British Columbia. We have a thriving tech community, film community, startup community in our province. Of course, lumber, agriculture, mining, green energy, tourism, all of those things are thriving, and our economy is growing. But we want our economy to grow faster, and we want it to become more diverse. And in British Columbia, we have become, over the years, very good at turning resources into wealth. That's been what our province was founded on. My great-grandfather came here and started his business in fishing, one of the founding industries, resource industries in our province. And so many British Columbians would have a story that's just like that. It's that wealth that is what has built this beautiful city. It's what has built the wealth that our province now contributes to the busiest port in the country, to make sure that we're supporting the rest of our nation as well. We have almost 3 trillion cubic feet of natural gas in northeastern British Columbia. A vast amount of energy locked up in the ground. There are those who say we have some of the richest basins anywhere in the world for drilling. And the investors, the 19 or 20 investors who are behind the proposals that are all somewhere in the process here in British Columbia to export natural gas from our shores, will tell you they look at that wealth of resource, and what they see is they see profits. They see an opportunity for a wise investment with a reliable partner in one of the most stable jurisdictions anywhere on the globe. And I look at it, and I see a way to create thousands of good jobs for the people here. I see a way to create the revenue that we need to support the social programs, hospitals and schools that we've done so well at distinguishing ourselves at across the world. I see a way for us to address global climate change. And I see most of all a way to change the face of the future for our whole country through the export of natural gas. And who knows what the future will look like? I often tell the story of J.D. Rockefeller. He was building Standard Oil. It started about 175 years ago this year. And back then, they were focused on selling kerosene for heating and for light. And back then, while they were focused on selling kerosene as a byproduct of oil, he and most of his competitors were dumping gasoline in the rivers because they couldn't find a use for it. Now, no one back then, 175 years ago, predicted, I suppose, the huge impact that the use of gasoline would have on growing our international economy and changing the way that we live. And I would argue that today, nor can we imagine the uses to which natural gas might one day be put. But we do know that the demand for fuels will continue to grow. And we also know that the demand for cleaner fuels will continue to grow at an even faster rate. J.D. Rockefeller could not predict what the market would look like, but he was nimble and he was innovative. He was also a very sharp operator. And he knew, just as we do here in British Columbia, that you can't build something without strong fiscal fundamentals. And too many jurisdictions all around the world have forgotten about that. They've forgotten that you have to live within your means, that you can't spend more than you take in, that you can't create the wrong economic climate and expect that people will invest and that your economy will grow. In BC, we have bucked that trend in North America. We have balanced 3 budgets so far. We will introduce a 4th balanced budget this February. We are running a $1.5 billion surplus this past year. And in 4 years, we will have entirely eliminated our operating debt, a debt that began in 1975, skyrocketed throughout the 1990s, and one that has threatened to burden future generations for decades. And even with balanced budgets and some of the lowest income and business tax rates in North America, we are still continuing to invest in important infrastructure. Infrastructure like Site C, the biggest public investment in infrastructure, the biggest investment in infrastructure in our province's history. A dam that will create 10,000 jobs and 1,100 megawatts of green energy. And none of this, balanced budgets, a AAA credit rating, eliminating our debt, and investing in infrastructure is happening by accident. None of it happens because it's inevitable. Otherwise, there is no explanation for Greece, no explanation for Spain, no explanation for Calgary. Because here in British Columbia, we've worked hard. We've had a plan, we've stuck with it, and we've recognized that that plan is the one that will grow our economy. We also have another thing that sets us apart, and that's the quantity and the quality of natural gas that you find in the Northeast. We've been extracting that for over 50 years, and I think most people who operate in the Northeast and around the world would tell you we have the best record anywhere on the globe for environmental sustainability and making sure we do it right. Recent studies in the Cordoba embayment have shown us that we have a 150-year supply of this clean, green, natural gas. And so we have a plan. We have a plan to take that energy that is currently locked up in the ground and export it to the world. We started that 4 years ago, and there were 2 active proposals. Well, now there are about 20 at various stages of development. There are over 30 investment partners, many of whom are here today, who are involved. And between them, they have already invested some $12.5 billion in this opportunity for British Columbia and for the world. Now, there are challenges. We know that. And I have to say, I'm never as concerned about the size of the challenge ahead of me as I am about making sure that we respond to it appropriately, recognizing it early, taking it on, and making sure we beat it back. Because the question isn't just what the prices are today, but what they will be in 5 or 10 or 50 years. You know that. You're in this business. And none of us can predict those things, and none of us can expect to control them. But my philosophy is we should work to control the things that we can. We should make sure that we take all those challenges, predict what they will be, and work backwards to make sure that we can solve them. Now, your biggest challenge in many places around the world has been labor supply. Labor supply that can drive up your costs and make your investment much, much more expensive than you'd ever predicted. We said we would work with you on that, and we are. So first, we've been working with proponents to make sure that we can quantify the needs of the private sector. Second, working with labor and contractors, First Nations, and across government and post-secondary institutions to coordinate the supply. Then third, re-engineering our K-12 system, re-engineering our post-secondary system, our apprenticeship system, so that we can supply the skills to citizens that they are going to need to be a part of your industry. We've already invested $3 billion through the Skills for Jobs blueprint over the next 10 years. A real commitment in recognition of the fact that you need to know that there will be skilled, reliable, highly trained workers available when you want your investment to start going. We promised we would create certainty for proponents. We promised we would create a competitive tax regime, and we've done that. We've passed the tax legislation in the legislature. It is now enshrined in the laws of our province, and we are negotiating project development agreements which are specific to each project, recognizing that each project has a different business case, and each one will require some different treatment. We've done our first PDA with Petronas, and we're working and continuing to negotiate several others at the moment that we hope will be concluded soon. We promised that First Nations would be a part of this opportunity, and so they are. We promised that we would bring First Nations and proponents together to iron out the wrinkles and make sure that both were working together cooperatively. This province has one or more pipeline benefit agreements with nearly every First Nation along the proposed natural gas pipeline routes. That's a total of 61 agreements with 28 First Nations. We've provided $30 million in new funding for the LNG Environmental Stewardship Initiative so that First Nations, first of all, had a direct say in helping design that, but it also means that First Nations will be an integral part of making sure we do it right. $30 million in new funding for specific Aboriginal skills training. First Nations in this country, as in many others, have been left out of the economic mainstream for way too long. And the LNG opportunity truly does represent a chance to redress historical wrongs, to change the course of post-colonial history, and make sure that First Nations are fully included in economic growth. We said that we would help rural communities cope with the challenges that come with growth, and we're delivering on that. We're working with small communities to smooth out some of the rough edges that come with rapid growth, making sure that we are supporting new investments in infrastructure, new investments in roads and ports and bridges, railways, investing in hospitals and in schools, in community safety, so that those small communities that will be hosting new LNG opportunities don't find themselves struggling and left behind. And finally, we promised that we would produce the cleanest LNG facilities with the highest GHG emissions benchmarks in the world, and we are doing that. We passed this into legislation recently, and your customers will know that if they're using BC gas, they will be able to trust that they are using the cleanest gas produced anywhere in the world. Today, as you well know, coal and oil account for 25 billion tons of greenhouse gas emissions every single year. Now, if all of that energy, just as a comparison, was converted to natural gas, that would mean a reduction of about 9 billion tons of GHG emissions every year. That would mean a reduction in the equivalent of all of the emissions from the United States, the world's second biggest economy. It's 1.5 times what they produce there now. That's the incredible change that natural gas can bring for our world in making it a better and cleaner place. And that's why we think LNG is a really significant articulation of who we are as British Columbians and the way we've always done things in our province. Clean, nimble, innovative, and reliable. We are in this in British Columbia for the long term, because in the next 20 years, global demand for energy is expected to double. The population will grow, and the population of people who have wealth to deploy will also grow. 200 million people in just the last 3 years alone have been lifted out of poverty. And every single one of those people, as they rise above poverty and begin to participate in the economy in a fuller way, will also begin to consume more energy. We want them to consume cleaner energy. We want it to be energy that comes from a competitive economy, that comes from a reliable, trustworthy partner. And just to finish, if you're not from British Columbia, you won't know that I'm always accused by my political opponents of being an optimist. And it's true, I am an optimist. I'm also a hard worker, because I know that optimism doesn't get you anywhere unless you're willing to roll up your sleeves and get the work done. But I think we have demonstrated with our record and the things we've gotten done in these last few years to get this industry off the ground that we are prepared to put in the hard work and the elbow grease. But I am also an optimist. And if you are investing in the energy sector, you must be an optimist too. Because it's not a predictable sector by any measure. It's exciting by most measures and full of challenges. But the thing about pessimists is they don't take risks. Pessimists are always waiting for exactly the right moment to come along, and guess what? That moment never does. They're always waiting. They're never changing the future. Pessimists don't make change. They fear it. Optimists make change. And when we make change and we recognize that that change that we make can make the future and the world a better place, we are doing a good for the world. So thank you for coming. Thank you for being a part of this. I hope you'll leave sharing in my optimism about the future of this industry in our province and the impact that we can all have jointly for the future of the world. I look forward to meeting with you, and I hope that the next several days are meaningful, full of information, and ultimately very profitable for all of you here. Thank you very much.